Two parallel dramas are playing out in the same theatre of conflict, one unfolding above the waves in test ranges and aircraft bays, the other taking shape on the water itself, where tankers, tolls and seizures are beginning to rewrite the rules of maritime power. They are connected by a single urgent problem: how to project force and deny revenue when high-value munitions are no longer as abundant as doctrine assumes. In Southern California last month, Navy and industry voices describe a quiet experiment with an outsized implication. An FA-18 Super Hornet launched a new turbojet-powered winged variant of the Joint Direct Attack munition, reported under the designation GB-U-75. The weapon left the Point Mugu Sea Range and, according to service and industry accounts, flew roughly 200 nautical miles before arriving on target. The test, proponents say, validated both propulsion and guidance systems needed to turn a familiar GPS-guided bomb into a long-range maneuvering standard weapon. Call it a JDAM-LR or a low-cost air-launched cruise option. The idea is simple and consequential. Rather than rely only on scarce, expensive cruise missiles, attached deployable wings, a small engine and the proven JDAM navigation pack, and suddenly a tactical fighter can carry multiple long-range precision weapons without consuming the nation's dwindling high-end missile inventory. For planners worried about the arithmetic of sustained operations, that trade cost per shot in exchange for range and maneuver is attractive. You buy numbers and reach where once only boutique cruise missiles could operate. That arithmetic matters because the backdrop for these tests is no longer theoretical. Across the Gulf, control of a narrow shipping choke point has become both an instrument of statecraft and a revenue stream. Iran has moved from rhetorical brinksmanship to concrete steps meant to normalize a new order in the Strait of Hormuz. A senior parliamentary official, Ahmadreza Babai, announced that money from transit tolls has already been collected and deposited into the central bank account. The message is blunt: passage can be inspected, screened and taxed, and those steps can be monetized. When a corridor carrying roughly 1/5 of the world's oil and gas flows becomes subject to administrative fees or barriers, the shockwaves extend far beyond the Gulf into cargo routes, insurance markets, and the price of energy on distant shelves. Those measures are reinforced by action at sea. In recent weeks, US Naval and Maritime interdiction teams have seized multiple vessels accused of transporting Iranian crude or otherwise violating sanctions. One seizure, identified in reporting as the MT Majestic, was conducted well beyond the narrow channel of Hormuz in the wider Indian Ocean and was said to be carrying nearly 2 million barrels of oil. A similar figure was attached to another captured vessel named the MT Tafani. Taken together, such interdictions are part of an effort to choke off revenue streams that finance Tehran's military activities without plunging the region into full-scale war. Seizures and tolls change behavior, shipping lines rewrite. Freight forwarders delay sailings. Insurers raise premiums or refuse to underwrite certain transits. Commercial actors, sensitive to risk and cost, adapt quickly. State policy, once enacted, becomes a series of private choices that reshape markets. That is the point. Turning a sea lane into an instrument of coercion is as much about altering economic calculations as it is about asserting military control. At the same time, American forces are confronting a less visible crisis: the rapid drawdown of key munitions and interceptors. Multiple outlets and Pentagon statements in recent weeks have spotlighted an uncomfortable truth: weeks of intensive strikes, defenses and interceptions of consumed inventories at rates that were unforeseen in peacetime planning, theater strike systems, Tomahawk-class cruise missiles, and various interceptor stocks have been drawn down in ways that force a hard look at how to sustain pressure without emptying the vault. That is the context for the JDAM-LR flight trial. If expensive, limited stock cruise missiles are the premium tool of precision deep strike, something in the middle tier is suddenly useful. A turbojet-powered JDAM variant promises extended reach, GPS accuracy at distance, and the ability to be fielded in larger numbers by fourth-generation fighters. In theatre, that changes the math for strike planners. Where once a strike package might include a handful of high-value missiles, commanders could now consider larger salvos of less costly standoff munitions, a dense, lower-cost attack wave that presents a different challenge to missile interceptors and layered air defenses than a small number of high-H-value cruise missiles. Still, no solution is free of complications. GPS-guided systems are vulnerable to jamming and spoofing. Lower car. OST weapons may lack the terminal seekers or stealth features that give high-end missiles survivability against advanced defenses, and the benefits of Reach are only as good as the targeting networks that feed them. More munitions without resilient sensors, timely targeting, and robust battle damage assessment risks wasted sorties and misallocated ordnance. The industrial dimension compounds the operational puzzle. Defense officials, pressed to restore depleted stocks, have reportedly approached major American manufacturers, including automakers and heavy industry suppliers, about whether assembly lines can be retooled to produce munitions or key components at scale. The goal is straightforward: shorten the time to replenish stocks and spread production beyond a handful of specialized contractors. The challenge is not. Tooling, explosive handling, materials certification, software integrations, and stringent quality control regimes turn automobile plants into difficult candidates for overnight conversion. Even where retooling is technically feasible, certifying production runs of warheads, seekers, and guidance units takes time and strict oversight. Officials warn replenishing some missile stocks could take months, in some cases longer, depending on demand, subcontractor throughput, and export control constraints. Meanwhile, Tehran seeks to turn endurance into narrative advantage. Public displays of missile hardware and parades of strategic arms have punctuated the political story inside Iran. On April 21st, state outlets circulated images and footage of ballistic missiles on the move in several cities. Those images are not just pageantry, they are a signal intended for domestic and foreign audiences alike. Infrastructure can be reconstituted, launchers can be reloaded, and deterrence is being presented as intact. Saeed Majid Musavi, identified and reporting as an IRGC aerospace commander, summed up a version of that narrative in stark language. He said, "Since the ceasefire began on April 11th, the United States has had to bring in ammunition from the other side of the world in a trickle. They have lost this phase of the war as well. They have lost the Strait, they have lost Lebanon, and they have lost the entire region." Words like that are designed to amplify resilience and to erode confidence. In response, American officials and some prominent voices have been equally forceful. One statement put it plainly: "We have total control over the Strait of Hormuz. No ship can enter or leave without the approval of the United States Navy. It is sealed up tight until such time as Iran is able to make a deal." Those declarations are part deterrent, part reassurance, meant to convince partners and markets that the flow of commerce can be protected, but they also bump up against the realities sailors confront at sea. Those realities are messy. Maritime interdictions raise legal and diplomatic puzzles. Questions about jurisdiction, the admissibility, tie of evidence, the status of cargo manifests, and the appropriate role of naval interdiction in what might be termed near peacetime operations will be litigated and debated. The vessels taken into custody, the legal filings attached to their cargoes, and the diplomatic ripostes that follow will help define the accepted norms of maritime law for years to come. For now, interdictions are one of the few levers the United States and its partners have to pressure Tehran economically without crossing thresholds that would open a broader war. The interplay among test ranges, ship decks, and factory floors is not merely coincidental, it is causal. If production lines can be expanded and new families of weapons fielded in the numbers required, American forces will reduce the pressure to reserve the highest value missiles for only the most critical targets. If industrial capacity cannot keep pace, commanders will face harder choices, ration targets, prioritize assets, and accept greater risk in theaters where adversaries possess capable missile and drone arsenals. For navies operating in contested littorals, that calculus matters in very practical ways. Longer-range, lower-cost munitions enable strikes from safer standoff distances, but they do not absolve the need for surveillance-resilient targeting networks and well-integrated command and control. Strike options are only as useful as the intelligence that finds and fixes targets. Without persistent sensors and reliable decision cycles, the increased reach risks wasted sorties and collateral costs that undermine strategic objectives. Beyond the operational and industrial dimensions, there is an economic war being waged in plain sight. A move to charge tolls or administratively impede passage can be normalized as a state policy, and the admission that revenue has already been collected introduces an instrument of coercion that is both subtle and powerful, making passage expensive, uncertain, or administratively cumbersome. Bait squeezes economies far from the Gulf long before political pressure manifests in capitals. Energy markets, freight carriers, and insurers all watch these shifts closely because rerouting tens of millions of barrels of oil or identifying substitute shipping lanes is costly and time-consuming. The US response to these pressures, both kinetic and bureaucratic, will have to be balanced. Diplomacy and legal measures can complement interdictions. Technological adaptation, from fielding a new class of affordable standoff munitions to accelerating production of interceptors and cruise missiles, will be essential, but so will patience and planning. Retooling industry and replenishing delicate inventories are tasks measured in months and quarters, not days. On the other side, Tehran is busy telling a story of resilience. The releases showing underground launchers, repair operations, and parade formations are intended to convince domestic audiences and foreign capitals that critical infrastructure remains viable, even under pressure. That narrative complicates coercion. If a state can demonstrate the ability to move, reload, and re-emerge, the deterrent value of interdiction and strikes is weakened, unless followed by sustained economic and diplomatic pressure. 5. In short, the contest now being fought across the Gulf is not limited to shots fired or ships seized. It is a competition over systems. Systems of production, of finance, of law, of logistics, and of narrative. The GBU 75 trial in Southern California and the seizures of tankers in the Indian Ocean are tactical moves with strategic consequences. Each informs the other, and each will shape decisions in boardrooms, shipyards, and war rooms for months to come. As night falls over the Gulf and the world watches tanker tracks and satellite feeds, two things are clear. First, the battlefield for sea lanes and oil revenue has moved into the open. The instruments of statecraft now include toll booths at sea and larger questions. NS about how commerce is secured. Second, the demand for munitions and creative operational choices has never been higher. Whether the decisions taken now in ranges, shipyards, and factories will be enough to sustain a prolonged pressure campaign remains uncertain. But what is certain is that the dynamics at sea, in production plants, and in diplomatic chambers are now inseparable elements of the same strategic contest. And their convergence will leave a lasting imprint on the balance of power and on the lives that depend on the safe passage of commerce through one of the planet's most consequential waterways.